question, what is an AI agent? And I have actually one of our interns, David, who is going to walk you through. And let me put him on the spotlight here. All right, David. I know you got the everybody's eyes in the world looking at you. No pressure. So, David, tell us a very quick background about yourself and how many decades of AI experience you have.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes, all good.
Okay, perfect. Hello everyone. My name is David Grice. I am an intern here at Hive. I'm just working here for this summer. Been working for about 6 weeks, and as JP might have hinted at, I have absolutely zero previous experience when it comes to software development, AI, anything like that. Um, but it really speaks to the availability and the power of these tools that I was able to build some really cool stuff while I was here just in 6 weeks. And I just kind of to walk some of you through if you're not familiar with coding or if you're just, you just want to build something like this for yourself and you are, just kind of walk you through on what an AI agent is and how best to do it. So JP, do you mind if I share my screen?
Yeah, sure. And so I'll give you kind of the initial use case, which is pretty universal to almost every single company. You've got that, God forbid you use SharePoint or you use whatever document repository for all your HR policy, all of your documents and information about how to operate within the business. Well, I said, David, why don't we create an AI agent called Ask Hive, where what it does is literally get all the documentation of the company, and any employee can ask anything to it to get an answer on all of the policies of the company. It's pretty straightforward. I think everybody on this call has the same use case. God forbid you're like, what do I wear to the offsite, or what's the work hours this week, or what are the on days and off days? Well, this approach will solve effectively all of those problems, right? And so, David, walk us from the very beginning of kind of like when you heard the scope of the problem, what was kind of your first step?
Yeah, so I'd say my first step on really building any AI agent is to kind of you want to just grasp, what the scope of the problem is and really kind of start feeding into an LLM some basic steps on building your first set of instructions. I would say that building AI agents, especially in Dust, is a very iterative process. You're going to want to plug in your first prompt, see how the outputs look, evaluate, replug it in, keep altering, what you've been building. So I'll turn to Ask Hive in a second. I just want to give you an example of an AI agent that, like, just the formations. I have some documentation on me building an AI agent the other day. So this problem that I had was I'm working with compliance. I'm primarily a law student. Um, and my goal was I needed to transfer about 100 contracts from our SharePoint, which we used, into Business Central, which is just a better contract repository. But going through all of those contracts and reading all of them manually and filling out an Excel sheet of all the start dates and end dates, all these little clauses I need to do, I mean, that is a huge time suck. 100 contracts is probably 35 hours of work. So I thought to myself, this is a perfect opportunity to build an AI agent. So what's my first step? First step is to go into ChatGPT. If you have Claude, you can use that. A lot of people think it's better. I think JP included think that Opus, like the new Opus model, is better. I don't have access to the new Opus model, so I'm using ChatGPT 5 here, which it works perfectly fine. And the first thing I'm going to do, can everybody see my screen, by the way? We're good?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is, and this is before prompt optimization, by the way, disclaimer, is I'm going to give it a very basic overview of what I'm doing. So I'm going to say, my company is making a shift for our contracts. I need an agent that will extract all this stuff. And I tell it very specifically to not hallucinate facts. That's something that's really important to me. And I would really encourage you that, as JP says, these agents are like high school interns. You really need to really be explicit in telling it what you want. So I say, don't hallucinate facts and use citations to point the user towards the location in the contract for a human check. So easy. And I'll have it output as a JSON format. And we talked about that in the other class, just for those who don't know or maybe don't remember. JSON is just an output that a computer or AI can better process because of the way it's structured. So the way that we talk with all the filler words, the and all the extra stuff, it doesn't need any of that. So JSON cuts out all that and makes it a really efficient process. And so then ChatGPT will give me a JSON. And this is, I mean, it's really simple in terms of like it will just give you the output that you need, and you can go through and kind of look at it and test it, put it into Dust in our instructions manual, and I'll take you to that in a sec, and go through. So it tells us this, and it said, so one of the things that I often like to do also is ask ChatGPT, how can I improve this agent? What are some steps I can take to make this JSON better, to make this more efficient? So one thing I did in here was ask it for improvements. Now, it accidentally put the improvements in the JSON, so I need to clarify and say, I want the improvement suggestions told to me by you. So it told me these improvements. I read through them. I said, okay, I like some of these. I would say an important step in doing this AI is not accepting every single thing it gives you. You're really need to think critically. In this case, I really did like all of the things that it gave me for improvements, but sometimes I'll go through and say, okay, I like improvements 1, 3, and 4. Like, those are good ideas. The other ones, probably unnecessary. But in this case, I liked them all, and then it gave me a JSON. So what I would do is copy this JSON in the copy code button over here, take it to Dust, and go to my contract extractor agent, which I made. So I'll just take you to the editing tab. This is kind of what a Dust looks like if you're viewing it, and if you're editing it. They just actually changed the UI the other day. So here's what it looked like. So literally, I went and I copy pasted this JSON into here. It will give you these tips at the bottom. So if there are still things you want to improve about your JSON, you can go in, or about your agent, you can go in and improve, follow these tips, and how should the assist behave, blah, blah, blah. And you can actually feed those back into your LLM, and it will tell you, okay, so I made a new set of JSON instructions on how to, give this AI, tell what to do. And so I gave it file generation, and that's really it in terms of like a really simple agent like this. And I'll talk about Ask Hive in a second because that's more complicated. But, just for a use case like this, I went and I fed all 100 contracts into here. I went and, I had it give me citations to human review on my own, but that probably took me 30 minutes to build, maybe. Just keep getting new iterations, keep trying it out. And when I finally got a product I liked, it took what it would have been 30 to 35 hours of work and made it 6 to 7 hours of work. And that's just that's just a very simple case. And JP, I can turn to Ask Hive in a second if you want, but that's a really simple case of just building an agent that can really help me out on a day-to-day project with little to no effort.
Yeah, I think there's a couple key things, and David, I'll give you a shortcut. So you could actually do everything that David did in ChatGPT in Dust. You could actually do it right here. So you actually didn't even have to leave the window. You could actually just do it. Now, David, why don't you do that? So why don't you ask it the same question and show how you do the prompting on here by just doing the @
You mean like at?
Yeah, ChatGPT or GPT-5, and then go ahead and copy and paste the
yeah, I'll copy and paste
prompt that you did before, and they can see exactly how that'll work. So, like I said, the goal here, especially as you scale your employee base, is not to scale up your costs exponentially with all the different tools, and it can be also into a safe enterprise environment. And this is designed for enterprises as well. Yeah, go ahead. You can click enter, and you can see it work. So it works very similar to all the other prompting systems. And there is some nuances as well, but you can see kind of its logic and how it's going through the process. Now, the key is there's always going to be a subtle difference from one tool to the next. I'll be completely frank, just because this is ChatGPT 5 model, is it going to be the exact same output? And the answer is no. One of the things that David also mentioned, which I am going to show you here, let me go back over here. So if you go to the website, one of the links that I provided is in the how-to guide section. It says building an expert prompt. So there's a video instruction that I found that was pretty good, and the link for it. He also mentioned what I call a recursive rubric optimization. So the first prompt that you click enter to is not going to be the best prompt. I say 3 to 5 items. So you can literally put this as part of your prompt before answering, create 3 to 5 rubric items. And what this is doing is it's actually going to self-critique its own output and pick the best version of the output. And as you can see here, if uncertain, generate one internal alternate and choose a strong result. I mean, this one I cannot emphasize enough. Again, similar to like the chat optimizer or the prompt optimizer, this is a really cool trick that takes no effort to do what David said, but in a more structured format. To basically go through and it will automatically recursively check which is better, which is worse as far as the prompt is concerned. So you can steal that. It's on the website as well. That for a copy and paste, whatever. And if you forget it like I do, you just go there and check it out. All right, David. So we've created an AI agent. Walk us through Ask Hive, which is, I think, a pretty universal agent that everybody who's got a company or is part of a company is probably going to have and wants. And we also want to make sure it's safe, secure, and giving correct answers and not hallucinating. Let's walk through that process.
Absolutely. Sorry. Yeah, you guys can. Okay. So Ask Hive is an agent, like JP said, that what it will do is it will answer any questions about Hive Financial. And you might say, okay, so what's different about Ask Hive as opposed to a really simple agent like the last one we built? And the key thing there is I'd say that we're incorporating knowledge sources into it. So something that you can do in Dust is you can add specific sources of knowledge for your agents to draw on. So I don't want my agent to be necessarily like quote unquote poisoned by all the stuff on the internet that might give it wrong outputs. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it specific things that it can turn to and look to, for example, for information on Hive. So what I have here is a semantic search tool. This is one of the ways you can add knowledge within Dust, and it will go through all of this information and search within it on things that it can look for to answer the question that is applicable. So I have all this different knowledge. Some of the stuff that I have in here, just for example, I mean, I've got connected to our Confluence pages. So all of our Confluence stuff is in there. I've got stuff related to HRI, our DDQ, about us, all this different things. One of the main things I have in here is actually every week at Hive, we have classes on Wednesday, which talk about different aspects of the company. And one thing I've done is I've taken those audios from those classes, turned them into a transcript, which actually now Teams will do on its own, and fed them to become JSONs, and it will draw on any of these presentations. It can tell you the speaker, it can tell you quotes, and I'll show you that in a sec. Now, JP mentioned security. The nice thing about Dust is that it's end-to-end encrypted, which is good for and it does not train third-party models with your data. So it's not going to take the stuff that you put into it and use it to train GPT-5. So those are two really important security steps. There's a page here where you can look more into Dust security if you want. Maybe JP can share that, but it's pretty easy to find if you just look up Dust
Oh, you know
enterprise-grade
what?
security.
Actually, David, there's a cheat. Go back in the Dust.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You want me to
So
help?
what you can also do is just ask at Dust. Go ahead.
Yeah. You can
Ask Dust.
ask help or I think it's ask help for this one. And you can
Does it
say,
help?
yeah, it's help. Dust is about like our company context. At help is a great tool. Like if any of the stuff that I'm saying is unclear, the great thing about Dust is, in what's kind of meta, is that you can go in and ask it about itself. And you can say, okay, Dust, like, how are you protecting my data? That's not very good typing. And it will go through and it'll show its process. I really do appreciate how like Dust has made this interface to where it'll show you the thinking process. I always like to see what's going on rather than just waiting.
And like what it's showing, it's also saying searching data. In our next slide, we're going to talk about NCP, which is like connecting different data sources. Many tech companies will use Confluence because of the whole like Atlassian, Jira, Confluence ecosystem. If Notion, we use that, for the class to make sure all of the materials are pretty easily accessible. And you can actually connect that, and we'll walk through that process. And it's super simple, both on Dust. You can also do it on ChatGPT, and we'll show a different how all the different LLMs can connect to those data sources. So it reduces the hallucination down to effectively zero in this process.
Yeah.
So
So
ahead,
here's the answer that it gave us on all of this data encryption stuff. So it's very secure. And it will, and again, like at help is a great feature. It will tell you genuinely anything you need to know about. So I've showed you all the knowledge sources. I just want to give you an example of how I'll do a live demo of how Ask Hive works. So the thing I'm going to ask it is, what is Peach, which is kind of our company culture motto. And one thing that's important to know about building these agents is that there's always going to be a trade-off between thinking power and time of output. Those are your primary two things you're going to want to think about, and you're going to want to alter those and alter your model based on what the function of the agent is. So for this one, Ask Hive, I want to give like a bit. I kind of have determined that a more balanced system is the best way to do it. So it's going to take about 15 to 20 seconds, maybe more today because the internet's been kind of bad. But I've determined that that is an optimal time. I've used GPT-5 on light reasoning to give it kind of a mix of reasoning and output. For something that I want to be super fast, like I have a compliance agent which goes over all of our messages, and I need that to be quick because I can't have, a customer on the other end waiting for 2 minutes for a message. So for something like that, I'm going to use OpenAI O4 Mini, which will be much quicker, but it has less thinking power. For like, I have another agent that does new contract screening. So it looks at all of our new contracts that we're negotiating and says, okay, here are potential risk areas for mitigation. Here are a bunch of red lines that we can change. I don't know why this is taking so long today, but here's a bunch of red lines that we can change. So for that, I'm going to use medium to high reasoning. And that will give us a much better output for, because in a use case like that, what's a minute versus a lawsuit? So it's an important, you really want to trade, you want to make that kind of balance in your head based on your use case. So here we go. Here's the output we got. So it'll tell us what our core framework is. It'll tell us like our culture and decision, what it means at Hive. And I see the reason I was long. And it will actually give us, the way I've rigged this agent is that it'll give us sources on exact transcripts on when we talked about this in our classes. So it can search through hundreds of thousands of characters, millions of characters for this case, and go through and find the exact sources and here we go, the Peach Values Framework. And
I think that's a good follow on, David, which is, all of us have training material. Mm-hmm. And we're doing training over training over training. And David, I think in your onboarding, you went through training content, right?
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to get from the beginning to the end of training? About how many hours to go through that process?
I'd say it took definitely a day of work at least, probably 2. So I'd say about like 8 to 10 hours, probably.
So one of the things that I think is so important, so we teach class every Wednesday in the company. We have weekly meetings, we have speaker series, we have a lot of stuff that's going on. There's no way David has memorized everything from those first 10 hours, let alone somebody who's working in the company like five years later. So one of the things that we really try to focus on is how do we get information out to everybody to make it convenient. And that's where building an AI agent basically takes static data from your company and makes it dynamic and active on demand. So that as people have questions and issues, that entire training cycle gets squashed. And from like a ongoing learning standpoint, it also makes it a lot more efficient from that standpoint.